Absolutely.
Bringing the heat at the fireside, bro.
You know it. Highway to the danger zone. How's that? All right, perfect. Well, let's see. Let's get you all mic'd up.
Oh, I should
TJ.
stand up for this.
You're all good. Let's get you all squared away. Perfect.
All right.
All right. Well, hello everyone. My name is Dr. Jamar Montgomery. As Ron said, been here since the beginning. Somehow got looped into a little bit of everything, and it's been an incredible experience for me. And hopefully that this will be an incredible experience for you. In fact, I know that it will be, because it is so great when, it is so great. It is so great when we're able to get individuals of the same background, the same like mind, who all have the same passion for building businesses, for making life a better place, making the world a better place, and making life better for everyone. And that's what we do as entrepreneurs. And then it brings in a whole different context when you start to bring the word of service. One of the things that I recognized was that leadership is about the service you provide, not the position that you hold. So anytime that we find ourselves serving, recognize that you're in a place of leadership. And I'm glad to get into this conversation with Mr. Timothy T.J. Neal. Let's give it up for him. All right, so I guess we got the shotgun mic.
We're working on it.
Not a problem, not a problem. So, how you doing, TJ?
I'm doing well. Let me ask, are we recording this? Is that why we need the microphone?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, gotcha. Now there's two mics.
Perfect.
Can you hear me on this one?
Yep.
Yeah? Okay.
I want to do it like podcast style. I'll do it like this. Let's get my mic like that, and let's see if you can hear me. Perfect.
Very exciting.
How's that?
All right.
Cooking with gas.
Does it look like I have a mustache?
Better hold it up here.
There we go. Well,
Doc, you want to say something about your background?
oh, goodness gracious. You know, Ron always makes sure that I tell people about myself, and I appreciate that, because that's something that usually that I find with service members is that they don't necessarily talk about themselves. They don't necessarily talk about their background. So a little bit about myself. I started college at 11 years old, started full-time at the age of 14. I graduated at the age of 19 with a Bachelor's of Mechanical Engineering. I went to work for the United States Navy as a weapons systems engineer. I was the youngest weapons systems engineer in the U.S. Navy's history. From then, one of my exciting times was when Kim Jong-un was launching his first ballistic missile, and they sent me out to Korea to go outfit the Korean ships. And they were itching to shoot that missile down. So this was in 2012. From there, I went to law school. I left working for the Navy, went to law school and got my MBA while I was there. Went on to teach political science at Southern University. Became a public defender that was working with children, and as if that wasn't enough, I ran for United States Senate in the 2020 elections. From there, from running, having an election and being an international menace after that. So speaking at Davos during the World Economic Forum, to teaching in Nigeria, and supporting delegations at the G7 in Hiroshima, Japan last year. So that's a little bit about me. But what I'm looking forward to...
You work at Boeing.
Oh, and currently work at Boeing, because I love airplanes.
I feel like I should be interviewing you. Yeah, so
You know, well, that's, you know, the thing is iron sharpens iron. So I'm always happy and always honored to be in the presence of individuals like yourself who have accomplished great things. So I'll let you go ahead and get into, give us your 90-second spiel. I'm calling you to the carpet.
all right. So I'll give you the Twitter version of my bio. You decide where, or maybe we call it X now. I do have a bit of an unusual background for somebody in the tech industry, 24 years U.S. Navy. So Naval Academy guy, engineering degree, then fighter pilot in mostly Super Hornets, test pilot, and then into what I would now call product management for the Navy. Navy calls it program management. When I left there, I was leading a $6 billion portfolio of software, avionics, and modeling and simulation programs for the F-35, which was awesome, but also super frustrating to be stuck inside one of the world's largest bureaucracies, as you might imagine. So the other thread to pull in my background is around innovation, which is kind of a tired word, but it sort of does the trick.
Okay.
I spent a year at Autodesk in San Francisco as a Secretary of Defense Executive Fellow on their Strategic Innovation team. Did some work there with human-robot collaboration. After leaving the Navy, went to work for a company called Alpha in Barcelona. Alpha is Telefónica's moonshot factory. So think like Google X would be the closest analog, like using radical new tech to create social impact. I was the head of moonshot launch there, launch being the operative word. Most of what I worked on was an AI tutor. And it was coming out of that I was introduced to the co-founder of my last company, who shared a very similar vision to the future of learning. So we went out and raised a couple million in venture capital, hired a team, built an app, and I spent the past 3 years in the ed tech space. We never quite reached product market fit with that company, so shut that down at the end of last year and found a new role at the intersection of the future of learning, the future of work, as the head of data and AI products being the operative word, at a company called 90.io. I probably exceeded my 140 characters, but that's the quick story of it.
Well, that's the thing, is that 140 characters isn't enough, right? And being able just to have that 90-second spiel isn't enough, because even right there were so many nuggets. You said fighter pilot, right? Who in here didn't want to be a fighter pilot when they were a kid? Right? I wanted to be a fighter pilot when I was a kid, right? So one of the coolest jobs that you can have, flying not only fighter jets, but flying them off the back of a ship. Test pilot, right? So you got to fly the new, you got to push planes to their limits. Then working on the F-35, then working in AI, and still now being in AI. Okay, all right, okay. Slacker, like just haven't done anything, did that and then made toast in the morning, right? So
I'm trying to decide what I want to be when I grow up.
that's a beautiful thing. That's a beautiful thing. I think a lot of us are still growing up. Every day we're growing up. What made you? I want to get into your transition. We're going to go back. I want to start there. What made you transition from the military and federal service into tech? Because that you don't see that often.
Well, so I've seen the arc of my career as increasing the amount of impact I make on the world, right? So as a fighter pilot, I feel like having an impact, sometimes a very literal one, but it's very like one-to-one.
Yeah.
As a test pilot, it's kind of one-to-many. You're sort of influencing the entire fighter community. But then you realize, really, I'm just providing data to the program managers who are managing the programs, procuring the new tech that's coming in to support the whole Navy.
Yeah.
It was in that place that I really got passionate around innovation and how much of it the military and the defense acquisition system in general was not doing.
Yeah.
So I was excited about creating that kind of impact inside the defense world, but ultimately kind of left in frustration, feeling I could make a bigger impact on the world outside of that than in it.
So I guess you got tired of hurry up and wait?
Well, look, I mean, one of the mottos that I kind of came up with, especially at the F-35 program office, was you have as much authority as you take. So whereas it's really easy to say that's, it's my problem, but it's not my responsibility. My first trip through there, I was literally at the bottom right corner of the org chart. And so it would be really easy for me to throw up my hands and say, I can't have any influence here. But what I recognize is if I wanted to get my job done, I had to just take on fix anybody else's job that was getting in the way of me getting my job done. So I was not frustrated, but it's frustrated by hurry up and wait. I mean, I think you can step in and you can make that difference, but boy, it's moving mountains to get that stuff done, right?
Yeah.
And I really longed for a place where you could just do the things that needed to get done without fighting your way every step of the way to do it.
Yeah, that's a different environment. That's a different environment. I know for myself, working on missile systems and working around ordnance, you know that there's strict rules, right? And they always tell you that these rules are written in blood, right? And then going to law school, and now there's all this ambiguity, and you're looking at people who are afraid of taking risks, but haven't necessarily been in a risky environment. And now being an entrepreneur, going into more the not even corporate world, right? I guess you saw the opportunity for you of, hey, the only thing that's stopping me is me.
Well, look, at the F-35 program office, I became kind of a bureaucratic ninja. Like, I was really good at getting things done inside that bureaucracy, but it was frustrating to have to do that. Taking me back now. So when I was at Autodesk around 2015, I gave a talk at their annual customer conference to their leadership forum, and the basics of the talk were that there's a spectrum of, I called it like an equity spectrum. On the corporate side, you'd say like as a Fortune 500 company, you've got a lot of equity to protect. That is, you've worked to develop a brand, et cetera. But on the other end of that spectrum, you're a startup. Like, you can do anything. There's nothing to defend. And the military analog there is like, if you are running an aircraft carrier, you've got 2 nuclear reactors, like you need procedures, you need bureaucracy in place to make sure that you're not like moving that fissile material in the wrong way. Mm-hmm. But if you're using those procedures to strap some rockets on a speedboat the way the Iranian Navy has done, that they can swarm out into the Persian Gulf, you're never going to compete with that kind of frequency. Yeah. And so the pitch there is like, don't use those that bureaucracy required for a nuclear reactor when all you're trying to do is something quick and innovative. You're at the opposite end of the equity spectrum. So my frustration was, we're trying to use that kind of bureaucracy to do things that don't require that at all. And I was like, I need to get away from that, and just go make things happen.
That makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense, because I think if you get so regimented in that it is difficult to break out of that. Did you find any challenges once you started to go into actual entrepreneurship? So leaving from federal service to entrepreneurship, to going into tech and then entrepreneurship, I should say.
Yeah. Well, when I popped out of the Navy and landed as the head of Moonshot Launch at Alpha, which is a totally new thing. There were no rules. It was all like figure it out from the start. Completely different set of problems. It's a lot easier to complain about the rules that are in place and find a way to work around them than it is to create all of the rules from the start. So it was different, much happier place for me, right? Because you can experiment, you can see what works, you can see what doesn't. But boy, it's a different feeling, isn't it, when everything's like on you and you're not just like comfortably wrapped around with a paycheck coming in every couple of weeks. And you just complain about all the things that are wrong with the organization.
What were some of the things that you learned during that particular experience? Something that you feel, if someone would have given you some advice before you made that transition or during that transition, what would that advice that you would give to yourself?
Yeah.
And what would be the advice that you would give to others?
Yeah. So I talk a lot about hypothesis testing. And the concept that whatever hypothesis you have right now is probably wrong. What I've learned is to figure out the fastest, cheapest way to test that hypothesis before investing a whole bunch into it and then discovering it's wrong and then making it really hard to switch, right? Yeah. So, as I showed up and was building an organization at Alpha, boy, I put a lot of effort into building out this thing that I thought was exactly what we needed to build, only to discover that, no, that was completely wrong, and having to pivot and start over. And so if I had, who here is old enough to remember watching Netflix on a low bandwidth connection? Is that right? Like before they first started streaming? I expected when Netflix would, you hit play, I expected, boy, it would like buffer and buffer and buffer and buffer and then start streaming in full fidelity. But it's not what it does, right? It starts immediately, but it's all like blocky and pixelated, and like the sound kind of cuts in and out, but you're watching the movie. And then as the buffer fills, like the fidelity kind of comes in and you're eventually watching like 4K and surround sound and all that stuff, right? That's the model that seems to work in this kind of environment. Get something going and learn, and then iterate towards the thing that's actually the answer.
Yeah, I thought about it when you were saying that, what is it, Admiral Wayne E. Meyer, build a little, test a little, learn a lot?
I think, the build, test, learn loop is right straight out of Eric Ries. John Boyd would have said, observe, orient, decide, and act. I'm a big fan of the OODA loop model, right?
Yep.
So this, there are a lot of models that fit this, but the big point is do it as quickly and as low cost and as low investment as you can while you're learning.
So it's really digging down into what is it that you're actually trying to provide, and build that instead of trying to build the 100% solution. Can I build a 20% solution? Can I build a 40% solution? Can I build a 60% solution and move as fast and move as quickly as that?
Yeah, and I think it's like pretty well accepted best practice in the startup world that that's what one should do. But I think the magic of it is actually doing that in a for real, what's the quickest thing I can do? Tomorrow, can I have a website up that's advertising the thing that I think might be valuable and see if people click on it, right?
Yeah.
Or do I spend 6 months talking about that to decide what's the website we should put up?
Yeah. What are some advantages that you believe your experience brought to Moonshot? And then I want to talk about the startup that you were a part of.
Yeah. So in the Moonshot world, I think coming from the largest defense program in history gave me the permission to think on that kind of scope, right? Can we build something that lasts for 50, 100 years? Can we invent new technologies all along the way? But also, the ability to say, let's not build a plan that relies on everything working in order for anything to work, right? Like I showed up at the F-35 program in year 17 of an 11-year contract. Having the scope and the vision, but then finding a way to build up to that. I think that experience was valuable both on the positive and the negative side.
Okay, what on the negative? Help me understand.
Well, what I mean is recognizing what not to do. Don't lay a plan that takes.
Got you.
Right. Yeah.
Got you. So you mentioned that you were also part of a startup and you raised what, $3 million or $6 million?
Just about two. Just about $2 million.
Just about $2 million.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Yeah. So.
I keep seeing that you find yourself in the learning and development kind of space.
So when I was at Alpha, we started with an exploration of the entire moonshot space. Like we really, there were no rules around it. Examine what we could do that could make an impact on society. And so we looked at everything. We looked at climate change. We looked at poverty. We looked at truth as a service. Where we landed was learning. It's kind of the meta moonshot. If you can fix learning, then that sort of fixes everything else because people learn how to do all those other things. Yeah. So I'm really passionate about the future of learning as a way to create impact in the world. So we were working on that at Alpha. The startup that I co-founded, Laotao, it had a similar vision to the future of learning but was less focused on technology and more about how do we connect humans? How do we facilitate the connection of humans that have complementary knowledge, like you know something I don't, and vice versa? And then how do we facilitate the exchange of that knowledge?
Yeah.
So that was the beautiful vision that we were founded on, right? Was unleash the world's cognitive surplus. What we discovered was that what we saw as a problem for humanity wasn't actually that much of a problem for individuals. Like, people didn't care that that problem existed, right? They just wanted to, like, how do I learn the skill that gets me paid more next month?
Yeah.
So we pivoted, and actually, one of the things that we discovered was learning has a behavioral economics problem. So learning is hard in the way that, like, diet is hard or exercise is hard. Like, it's good for you, you want to do it, but when you're given the choice between the salad and the pizza,
I'm choosing the pizza.
Right, you're going for pizza, even though you know it's against your best interest, right?
Don't give me a Costco pizza, because it's on the pop.
And it's cheap, right? Yeah. So what we pivoted toward was providing coaching for learners to develop a lifelong habit of learning, which really kind of caught on, but then we were out of money, and there was no way that B2C, going to market in B2C is hard and it's expensive.
Yeah. What were some of the things that you learned in that experience? Because it sucks, because a lot of times we say that we learn more from our failures than our successes. What were some of the things that you learned in that experience?
Well, one of them was like what I've already said,
right,
about we spent a lot of money and a lot of time building something that we hadn't fully validated. We didn't realize, it was obvious to us that the problem existed, but with consumers, it wasn't a problem. And we spent, $1 million figuring that out. There would have been much better ways to do that had we been smart about it.
So was that where you were saying, was that an instance where you spent more on trying to solve this particular problem and not getting something that worked, or was that a different experience?
Well, as I think about it from this moonshot thinking perspective, right? You want to create change in the world. In order for something like that to be successful, it needs to resonate with individuals and needs to have a viable economic engine, right? Charity only goes so far. Eventually, people run out of money, or it's because it's not sort of driven by market dynamics, it fails. And we were out there trying to solve this grand problem on the scale of the human race without finding a way to do it that had a viable economic engine.
Got you. Okay. So obviously you have a heart for entrepreneurship, and you didn't stop. So you found yourself in another startup. You said 90?
Yeah, 90 is the name of the company.
Okay.
It is a Series B startup. We've grown at about 80% year on year for the past couple of years. I just joined at the beginning of this year, not in a executive role. I'm a head of product level in the AI and data space. But very exciting growth and really cool place to be bringing this exciting explosion in ML and AI to bear on the problems that they're facing.
Do you miss fighting? Do you miss flying fighter jets?
It's funny. I feel like because I've been kind of in and out of the cockpit through my whole career.
Okay.
And I've never missed flying when I'm not in the airplane. But then when I go back to it, I'm like, oh man, this is so great. I don't know how to do without it. But I'll say this: when I went to my last flying job, I was the department head for carrier suitability at VX-23. So we was doing all the flight tests for taking airplanes to the boat. So it was lots of day landings on the carrier, nothing night, nothing bad weather. It was like the best job in the Navy. But about a year into my 2-year tour, I came across this opportunity to apply for this fellowship at Autodesk. And I thought to myself, man, I'm having a ton of fun, but I just don't feel like I'm making that much impact in the world. And actually left that job a year early to go to Autodesk and get into that innovation space and move there. So in some sense, I miss flying. In another sense, I'm super happy to be where I am. I'm really excited to be doing the things that I'm doing, and it's more fulfilling than flying was in that last year.
Where do you see yourself making the most impact? You said that a few times about that. it was an impact on a one-to-one basis, and now being able to make greater impact. Where do you see yourself making impact in the future?
Yeah. So the problem that I think is super interesting right now is where I am at 90. 90 is a B2B SaaS company. We provide software that helps small to medium-sized businesses run their companies. If you've heard of the Entrepreneurial Operating System, it runs that in software or any other operating system. What I'm working on there is bringing in learning into that space and making people better at executing those operating systems. So I'll lay out an interesting learning history thing. So there's this guy called Benjamin Bloom. He was an educational psychologist back in the 80s. Maybe you've heard of Bloom's taxonomy of learning. He did a different study in 1984, and what he did was he sent multiple cohorts of learners through the same material. One cohort was one-to-one tutored, and then at the other end of the spectrum, it was like the standard kind of one teacher in the front, 30 kids in the back. And the results were, in some ways, obvious, but in other ways kind of astounding. The one-to-one tutored kids did better than the regular teacher kids, right? Which sounds obvious. But they actually did 2 standard deviations better. Two sigma. So the average one-to-one tutored kid was better than 98% of the teacher kids. And so ever since, that's been called the 2 sigma problem in education. And but it does kind of beg the question, right? That was in 1984, 40 years ago. So why does education look exactly the same now as it did 40 years ago? And I think the title of his paper is instructive. The title was "The Search for Group Methods of Instruction as Effective as One-to-One Tutoring." So the question that I'm asking right now, and I think technology enables us to do this, is instead of how do we find group methods of instruction that effective, how can we bring one-to-one tutoring to every human? And I think it is enabled by AI, and I think it is in the workplace.
Gotcha. How are we doing on time, Ron?
We got a lot to get through. So
Cool.
We got
All right.
4
Cool, not a problem.
questions, and then we want to do
Right.
introductions for the whole group. So
Not a problem.
Right.
I want to open it up. I want to open it up to our audience because I'm sure that you guys have some questions. Please.
great talk, very interesting.
By the way,
Who I am and all that stuff.
you don't have to do all that.
Oh, okay, cool. All right, super.
There you go.
I guess hi, I'm Justin E. Carlson, PhD, physics, so I get the math stuff. I'm the president and CEO of Soldiers to Civilians. We get veterans jobs, and we are your local link to veterans and employers. So one major issue that a lot of veterans face when they're moving from DoD, service branch, to the civilian world is certifications. You might be certified, do something in your service branch on your base, and then you want to do that in the civilian world and you can't. So I'm very interested in your education. Was it I always forget the terminology, the ed tech, in order to somehow translate military time on sea or time wrenching or whatever it is, translate that to some sort of civilian certification and find some sort of conduit. Like we're working with the Machinist Institute and Maritime Institute in order to kind of translate that military time into some sort of temporary civilian certification that can get the job, get the internship, and then get the certification later. So basically, from an ed tech perspective, is there anyone that's working in this space to try to solve that military to civilian cert issue?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that like the good news is that the macro trend in education and workforce development is that we're moving away from big, broad credentials like a college degree and toward smaller skill-based credentials that show that you can actually do the thing, right, whatever the thing is. And you see some of that at Google with their certifications that they have. The bad news is that it's really difficult to break that brand credential loop, right? You've got Harvard on, you've got the checkbox.
Let me clarify. I'm talking about if you want to be an able-bodied seaman so you can work on deck, or you want to be in the trades kind of thing.
Yeah,
as opposed to, the is different, yes.
Completely understand, although I think the problem is the same, which is just that the fundamental question is how do I prove I know how to do the thing that you want me to do? And I think that there are folks working on that, but it is a tough nut to crack. I mean, I would, if there's a founder in here that wants to work on that, I want to talk to you because I think there's lots of opportunity. But I don't have the answer other than to say I think it's like the trick is getting the hiring managers to believe that whatever certification you have is an effective vetting of you as an applicant.
That's what I'm
Yeah.
trying to. Next question, I guess.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
We'll talk about later.
Anyone else?
Just out of curiosity, where might Montessori fit in with that, group versus one-on-one versus like the Montessori principle, kind of autodidactic, kind of.
Yeah, Montessori had really wonderful ideas about how to empower children to take charge of their own education. It feels like at some point there's a breakdown between the really curated environment that she's created in Montessori schools and the skills required to interact with sort of the workplace. But I think, the UK opened their first AI-only school for K-12 just this week, I think.
Wow.
I do think that, whether we apply all of Melissa Montessori's tenets, the idea of autodidact is something that matters a whole lot, especially because 65% of kids in school today will go on to do jobs that don't yet exist. And so when you step off the edge of that institutional educational cliff, there's very little support for you. Putting in place either institutional support or technological support to allow you to continue to learn throughout your career builds upon those principles. Yeah, yes, sir.
All right, I got a question for you. So this is like the inaugural meeting of a group, right? So this is an emotional question, and I hate to kind of pry into it, but I think you've got an experience that all of us should learn from. You raised a lot of money, had a successful startup, and then you had to close it down. So at some point, you had to realize that it didn't work, and you had to give the money back, or how do you do it? So can you talk briefly about when did you have to make that decision to say, this ain't working?
Yeah.
Just tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. Boy, there's a lot to talk about here. I was with a co-founder who had fronted a lot of his own money to make it happen. So he had a bit more stake in this than I did. We had a moment where we realized that the way we were executing this was not sustainable. We had to lay off basically the entire engineering team. That was a terrible moment as a co-founder, but also great learning about we were able to replace 11 people with a quick backend that we built into Slack and did the same thing. We continued to push that for another year, drove our metrics of. Are you familiar with the ladder of proof from NFX? Okay, a couple head nods, right? You need to prove a lot of things before you're a successful company or to raise your next round of funding or whatever, right? We've solved some of the lower rungs of the ladder of proof. We had trouble with adoption of our product. We had trouble with engagement. We fixed those. And then we started going to market, and we couldn't cross that barrier. And so it was obvious to both of us that this wasn't going to work without more funding to do that go-to-market motion. And so, a lot had changed from 2020 to 2023. Money was not nearly as available. Folks that were doing seed rounds were looking for, Series A metrics. So we made a pretty solid effort to raise. When we realized we were not fundable in this environment, it was a hard decision to say, this is finally working. we have to shut it down. But it was clear to both of us, it wasn't going to happen. So difficult decision. I think once we made that decision, certainly for me, boy, I felt a whole lot better about moving forward. And boy, I learned a lot. And that there's a future for that someday when the funding environment is right. Maybe we'll come back to it.
Data point to share. Always surprises founders to hear this, first-time founders. The average exit is 3.5 startups in. Average founder has 3.5 startups where they get an exit event.
And Ron, what's your batting average?
3.
Out of?
I got my first exit of 10 companies, 8 which have either exited or shut down. 4 exited, thankfully, but the first 2 did not, and then the last 2 did not. So much for track record. But yeah, the average is 3.5, which means if you're thinking rationally as a founder, you're probably doing the practice rounds. You might get lucky, many do, but statistically, 3.5 attempts before an exit.
I'll say a great question, and I think for the honesty up there. And actually, I think this is a wonderful discussion to have. We have a lot of entrepreneurs in here. I have an idea. I have a dream. I want to make it work. Am I drinking my own Kool-Aid? And so, so you guys, this kind of I wouldn't say like a more abstract concept. Starting, hey, look, we think the issue is this. We haven't really talked to the customers who are actually our customers, but we feel the problem is this, and we've aggregated people around us who believe that same problem, and we've got the money in there. It's all validated. Everything's fantastic, and so you're pursuing this thing, but wind up with a big mess on your hands at the end. Take that the right way. Hard work, lessons learned,
Yeah.
and incredible amount of, I respect it, seriously. So the people here, they want to do the same thing, but you can get different types of partners. You can get smart money. Hey, look, I'm going to come in here and I'm really going to dissect your market. I'm more of a partner than an investor. You're going to have the dumb money. Hey, look, I just want to cut you a check and make sure I get my 10x. But I'm going to call you on Friday and brag to all my friends on the golf course. This is great. There's different types of money, but really the customer and the product you're making and the revenue stream is going to be the driver. That's going to, or the shot on goal there, the potential of that. So why am I saying all this? I'm interested because you had that experience. Hey, look, great project, great team, we're funded, we're doing good things, and it didn't work out. So people here have that same concept. Hey, I have this concept, I want to do this, whatever it be, I have a widget I want to design, I have some software I want to build, whatever it is. How can they, you talk about the ladder of validation. What can people do here to check that early? And I went down San Diego, whatever. Fail fast, fail hard, fail early. And don't lose your family's house. So, I don't know, it's more of a seance than anything else, but how
We got to wrap up the question.
Yeah, so the question would be if you would have gone back and thought, hey, look, we got this much money for this project, what you have done to validate that this is actually going to hit the market right? Because I think that's a lot of people don't do that. They get caught up on the product, but it has to hit the market.
So let me answer that question quickly, and I want to put a little bit more feeling into the question that you asked, Steve, and then I'll promise I'll shut the hell up. Look, when we raised, money was really cheap and it was really easily available, and I think that contributed to our problem. There's no way we should have been able to raise that amount of money with the validation that we had up to that point. Had we only been able to raise $500,000, we would have validated the idea before we started paying a bunch of engineers to build stuff for us, right? So I think that being disciplined about achieving a level of validation before investing in taking it to the next level. Now, conceptually, that's easy to say. I don't have the right answer for every single situation, but I think that's the concept: is what's the cheapest, fastest way I can do this? And if the answer is no, pivot. Or stop, but don't spend more. Don't throw bad money after good.
I can add a little color to that. In 2020 and 21, money was coming off the hospitality industry, airline industry, and going into tech. It was flooding. venture funds, and they were spraying and praying to a great degree, right? Not doing their usual level of due diligence. More important, that we get money placed. And so very, very authentic answer there. At times there is a race to quality. Right now we have the tidal wave is receded, right? And so now it's harder to raise money, so there's a race to quality, which means you better have done all your customer discovery, all the research ahead of time. Just as an FYI, to those of you who are new to venture mechanics, we have a series of 10 founder workshops that rotate every quarter. Angie co-instructed the customer discovery one, which I highly recommend. It's coming up again in about another month. Yeah. And so we do teach those techniques here, absolutely, and everybody should go through full-blown due diligence. I'm afraid we got to wrap it up because we're going to be here all night, but this is fantastic, guys. Thank you so much.
Thanks, bunch.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you. Last question. What was your call sign?
Ubi, U mit an Umlaut, and a B. I'll tell you about it later.
I appreciate you.
Hey,
Thank you.
thanks so much, Jamar.
Great.
All right, so before TJ exits completely off stage, just want to let everybody know about a program we have here called Top Gun. We do together, TJ and I with Ron Hayes over here, another Navy test pilot. It used to be called What I Learned About Entrepreneurship from My Business Instructor. I've been doing that for 24 years, met these guys, and they bring much more, a higher Mach speed and being shot at perspective. I'm just a low